I won the lottery, and I'm leaving you, Lila. It's time I found someone who truly believes in me." The words hung in the air like a suffocating fog as Derek stared me down across the living room. My heart pounded, threatening to burst from my chest. This had to be some sick joke. "What are you saying?" I stammered, glancing at my sister Nora and Derek's friend Alex, who wore equally dumbfounded expressions. Derek's lips curved into a self-satisfied smirk as he produced a lottery ticket from his pocket and waved it in front of my face. "Feast your eyes on our golden ticket to freedom, my dear." My legs felt like jelly as the gravity of his announcement hit me. You won the lottery? And you're leaving me?" "That's right," he nodded, his eyes narrowing. "I'm finally getting out from under your doubting shadow and living like I deserve with someone who supports my dreams." The cruel insinuation of his words stung like acid. Was this truly the man I married 5 years ago? The one who once showered me with affection and appreciation? "Derek, I've always supported you," I cried out, desperate for him to see reason. "Your inventions, your business ideas, I believed in you every step of the way." He let out a mocking laugh. "You expect me to believe that? I saw the skepticism in your eyes whenever I pitched a new concept, the way you'd grit your teeth and nod along, just indulging my silly fantasies." My mouth hung open, a retort dying on my lips as my mind raced for a counter-argument. How could I convince him of something he was so resolutely convinced wasn't true? "You're delusional." Nora's shrill voice pierced the tension, her eyes blazing as she stepped forward. "Lila has been nothing but a supportive, loving wife to your sorry ass." "Stay out of this," Derek snarled at her, whipping his gaze back to me. "I'm doing us both a favor and sparing you the agony of waiting for me to succeed. With this lottery jackpot, I can finally surround myself with people who genuinely want to see me soar." As his vicious words swirled around me, stealing the breath from my lungs, the true depth of his betrayal became painstakingly clear. He wasn't just leaving me, he was leaving me for someone else. Someone he claimed appreciated his ambitions in a way I apparently hadn't. I opened my mouth to speak, to hurl back the venom he'd spewed at me, but Nora beat me to it. "You low-life scumbag," she shouted, lunging forward as if to attack, before Alex swiftly wrapped his arms around her, restraining her flailing limbs. "Don't you dare stand there and act like you're doing Lila a favor. You're just a selfish snake looking to trade her in for some young, naive thing who worships your ego." Derek's eyes widened momentarily at her outburst, before narrowing again in derision. "You'll see," he muttered darkly. "You'll all see." With that parting shot, he spun on his heel and stormed out, slamming the front door behind him with a resounding thud that shook the walls. In the ensuing silence, I sank shakily onto the couch, the lottery ticket still clutched in my trembling hands. The stark numbers seemed to taunt me, a prize beyond my wildest dreams that should have been a joyous blessing, now marred by the harsh reality of the husband who had won it. This was my life now, my marriage in shambles, my heart in pieces. All because Derek had come into an obscene amount of money and allowed it to warp his perception of everything we once had. As tears streamed down my cheeks, I felt Nora's arms encircle me from behind, her quiet sobs mingling with mine. Beside us, Alex stared off into the distance, his expression haunted by the ugly scene he'd just witnessed. This was the hand I'd been dealt, but no amount of wealth was worth sacrificing my dignity, my self-worth. Derek's cruel rejection would not be my undoing. It would be the spark that ignited an unquenchable fire of vengeance within me. He wanted to see someone who truly believed in him? I'd make sure the whole world saw Derek Jefferson for the delusional, egomaniacal traitor he really was. The next few days passed in a blur of anger, heartache, and disbelief. Derek's words continued to echo in my mind, that outrageous claim of me not believing in his dreams. The more I relived that terrible night, the more convinced I became that his insane justification for leaving hid an even uglier truth. "There has to be more to this," I told Nora one morning over coffee, my hands trembling as I clutched the ceramic mug. "Derek has lost his mind if he truly believes the lies he's telling himself." Nora nodded grimly. "That arrogant jackass is hiding something, I know it." She leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "Have you tried calling him again?" "A dozen times," I sighed. "He's not answering." "Of course not. He's too busy rolling around in his lottery millions with his new delusional worshiper by his side." My fists clenched involuntarily at her words. There's no way he's dumb enough to blow all that money catering to the whims of some vapid gold-digging hussy. Except the more I thought about it, the more it made twisted sense. My throat constricted as a horrid suspicion formed. Oh, God. What if that's his plan? What if he's already found a woman just as narcissistic as he is, who will happily live off his winnings while feeding his ego? You think he's got someone lined up already? Nora looked aghast. That's low, even for him. Jaw clenched. I dug out my phone and began scrolling through missed calls, finally hovering over the contact info for Alex, Derek's best friend from college. He always saw through Derek's bullshit. Maybe he had some insight. The line rang twice before Alex answered, his tone guarded. Lila, what's up? I need to know everything, I stated bluntly, taking a fortifying sip of coffee. Everything you know about what's really going on with Derek and his big lottery dreams. There was a heavy pause before Alex sighed heavily. To be honest, I'm not sure I want to get in the middle of this mess. White-hot anger flared within me, burning away my composure. Don't give me that crap, I snapped, my voice rising. Your idiot buddy just destroyed a 5-year marriage based on one insane, narcissistic delusion after another. You're damn right you need to get in the middle of it and tell me what you know. Another pause. Then, okay, you're right. I could picture Alex rubbing his temples as he continued in a low voice. A couple weeks ago, Derek was bragging to me about how he scored big with that lottery prize. He exhaled heavily. But he also mentioned some girl he'd been seeing behind your back, an influencer or something, way younger than him. What? I gasped, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut as the reality sank in. He's been cheating on me? Yeah, and from what I could gather, his big plan was to use the lottery money to wine and dine this chick into being his new guaranteed pay pig for life, all while making it seem like she's just this huge supporter of his entrepreneurial spirit or whatever. The mug slipped from my hand, shattering on the floor and splashing hot coffee across the tile. Derek's betrayal sliced through me deeper than any serrated blade ever could. Not only was he leaving me in the cruelest way imaginable, he was happily trading me in for the shallower pleasures of a materialistic, status-obsessed bimbo. As if sensing my inner turmoil, Alex continued in a wary tone. I tried warning him that what he was doing was beyond screwed up, but you know how Derek gets when his mind is made up on something crazy. I always thought his arrogance stemmed from some deep-seated insecurity, I said thickly, my throat burning with unshed tears. But this is a new low that I never imagined. Through the haze of shock and heartbreak, one thought began to take form. A terrible, irresistible desire to make Derek pay for the anguish he'd put me through, to show him the consequences of his betrayal, starting with the woman he meant to discard me for. I met Nora's gaze, an unspoken understanding passing between us. Get me everything you can on this so-called influencer, I stated, my voice hard. Every social media account, every fan page, anything to give me ammunition against the little harlot trying to steal my husband. Nora's lips curved into a vindictive smirk. Oh, I'll do better than that, sis. She whipped out her phone, fingers flying across the screen. By the time we're done, this attention-starved bimbo is going to wish she never laid eyes on Derek Jefferson's selfish ass. My own smile mirrored the icy promise of vengeance brewing within me. The delusion was over. Derek and his new prize were about to face the harsh sting of reality, and I would be the one delivering the painful wake-up call. That low-life scumbag! The words erupted from my lips like venom as I slammed my palms on the kitchen table, glaring at the picture of Derek grinning next to his vapid influencer fling. Alex shifted uncomfortably beside me, his expression pained. I know, Lila. Believe me, seeing him throw away your marriage for this bimbo makes me sick too. Well, we're going to make him regret it. My voice dripped with steely determination as I turned to face my unexpected ally. In the aftermath of Derek's bombshell betrayal, it was Alex who had stepped up as a steady source of support and inside information. While Nora busied herself uncovering every sordid detail about the social media starlet latching onto my ex like a parasite, Alex had filled me in on more of Derek's twisted motivations. Apparently, Derek's lottery delusion ran even deeper than I'd realized. He was convinced this cam model with a rapper bod, as Nora crudely dubbed her, was the only one who could appreciate his entrepreneurial spirit. The perfect accessory to flaunt his wealth and prop up his crumbling ego. We have to hit him where it hurts, take away the two things he cares about most, Alex stated grimly. His money and his inflated sense of self-importance. I nodded, my jaw setting. And thanks to you, I have the evidence to do just that concerning his lottery winnings. A twisted smile played across my lips as I retrieved the faded convenience store photo tucked in my pocket, an image of Alex, Derek, and I smiling and holding up our fateful lottery ticket from years ago. The very ticket Derek was now trying to claim full ownership over. Once the truth comes out about us being partners on this prize, his plans to bankroll a lavish lifestyle for himself and his new arm candy fling are going to hit one hell of a financial roadblock. Not to mention the PR nightmare it'll cause when the world realizes what an egotistical, manipulative dirtbag he really is. Nora strode into the room, fire blazing in her eyes, as she slapped a thick manila folder on the table. Speaking of which, I've got enough dirt on the so-called influencer to make their heads spin. Sliding the folder toward me, she flipped it open to reveal a myriad of social media posts. Selfies of the heavily made-up, surgically enhanced blonde posing and pouting, her shrill captions overflowing with narcissistic hashtags and vapid catchphrases. Her real name is Belinda Stone, 24 years young and dumb as a brick. Nora's tone dripped with contempt, originally from a wealthy family who cut her off once she got too absorbed chasing internet fame and fortune to care about anything else. My stomach churned with revulsion as I absorbed the evidence of this woman's unabashed vanity, materialism, and willful ignorance. No wonder Derek was enamored. She was essentially a funhouse mirror version of himself. We have to take her down, along with that ego-bloated pig she's parading around with, I declared, steadying my nerves with a deep inhale. Expose every dirty secret, every con, every pathetic ploy for attention they're attempting to pull. Alex let out a low whistle as he scanned the damning information Nora had gathered. Starting to feel sorry for these two, the more I see how sadistic your revenge is going to be. A harsh laugh escaped my lips. Don't feel too sorry, they're the ones reaping what they sowed. Resting a hand on the folder, I met Alex's gaze, my eyes hardening. Once the world sees them for the shallow, manipulative frauds they are, Derek and his little harlot won't have an ounce of admiration or respect left to feed their delusional narcissism. A grim smile crossed Nora's face as she gave a resolute nod. Time to watch the shit hit the fan, sis. I mirrored her expression, feeling the familiar flames of rage mingle with a deep, vindictive satisfaction. Indeed it is. Derek wanted to see someone who truly believed in him? By the time I was through, the whole world would see just how unworthy he was of anyone's belief or devotion. The painful downfall of his sickening delusions would serve as the harshest slap of reality. And I wouldn't stop until his despicable arrogance was shattered into a million irreparable pieces. This better work. The hushed words slipped through clenched teeth as I stared at the screen, watching the final edits to the video Nora had meticulously crafted. My sister flashed me a reassuring smirk. Relax, sis. This is like dangling bloody chum in front of a great white shark. Belinda will take the bait, hook, line, and sinker. I shuddered inwardly, still uneasy about deploying such underhanded tactics. But after learning the full extent of Derek's betrayal and Belinda's part in it, any moral compunctions I had were overshadowed by my thirst for vengeance. They needed to pay, to have their deceit and shallowness shoved back in their smug faces for the whole world to witness. Nodding resolutely, I clicked the upload button, and within seconds the video began spreading across the internet like a virus. A perfectly curated look at the affluent, glamorous life I was now supposedly leading post-divorce. Strategic shots highlighted a luxurious and tastefully decorated home, designer clothes and accessories draped across every surface, even a sleek new sports car parked in the driveway with a bright red bow planted on the hood. Of course, none of it was real. Just one big, elaborately staged deception made possible through Nora's media connections and an underground production team specializing in fabricating fake realities. That smug tramp won't know what hit her. Nora grinned viciously, scrolling through the slew of comments already pouring in from confused onlookers, speculating about my newfound wealth. Holy crap, look at all the thirsty dudes already slobbering over those bikini shots. She let out a mocking laugh. I almost feel bad for how badly we're going to break their desperate little hearts. Any glimmer of guilt I felt was extinguished as I stared at the still images showcasing my toned body draped in attention-grabbing swimwear around a glistening private pool. A far cry from the modest one-pieces I usually favored. Plastering on a saccharine smile and pouty expression took more effort than I cared to admit. But playing into the delusion, putting on a facade, was the only way to make this sting as painfully as it needed to for Belinda and Derek. Because that was their greatest downfall, letting ego and vanity blind them from appreciating what really mattered in life. Integrity, honor, mutual understanding and sacrifice in a relationship rather than selfish delusion. Does this go too far? I asked uncertainly, watching the spectacle spread further across various social platforms. I mean, is there a line we're crossing into dangerous territory? Alex's voice made me jump as he emerged from the kitchen, a mug of coffee in hand. Nah, don't overthink it. You're just giving the soulless narcissists a taste of their own medicine. There was an edge of bitterness to his tone that surprised me, but I supposed seeing his oldest friend spiraling into egomaniacal delusion would breed resentment in anyone. Soon as Belinda thinks you've become the richer, spiteful ex out for revenge against Derek through shameless flaunting, she'll come sniffing around to ingratiate herself. Alex shook his head in disgust. Self-preservation is all that talentless leech cares about. Exactly. Nora stabbed a finger at the screen, where several tabloid reports were already emerging about my mysterious new fortune. She'll see this diamond-studded opportunity dangling in front of her shallow eyes and do whatever it takes to latch on. Glancing between my co-conspirators, I felt a swell of gratitude for their unwavering support and willingness to go to such depraved lengths in the name of karma and revenge. I couldn't have executed such an elaborate ruse alone. With a steadying breath, I straightened my shoulders and tightened my resolve. Whatever lines we had to cross in the coming days, it would all be worth it to pry Derek and Belinda out of their self-indulgent fantasies. Once their true, ugly natures were exposed under the harsh global spotlight, not even their ill-gotten lottery winnings could shield them from the crushing downfall that awaited. This charade would either make them face reality or completely unhinge them as their world of delusion came crumbling down. And I would be the merciless instigator, ensuring that total cathartic ruination occurred. The shrill ring of my phone shattered the tense silence that had settled over the room. Nora and I exchanged a loaded glance before I snatched it up, my heart pounding. Hello? Lila? Oh my God, is it really you? The sugary sweet voice on the other end made my skin crawl with revulsion. It's Belinda. I had to resist the urge to hurl the phone across the room. Of course, the vapid leech was slithering her way back into my life, her greed overriding any sense of shame or decency. Fighting to keep my tone even, I replied, Yes, it's me, Belinda. I take it you've seen the footage circulating about my new lifestyle? Girl, yes, it's absolutely incredible, she gushed in that gratingly vacuous way of hers. I mean, those houses, those cars, those designer bikinis, you're living the dream. My lip curled involuntarily. If only this delusional bimbo knew the true extent of her mistakes in aligning herself with a man like Derek. But she would soon enough. Well, I'll admit the past few months have been... I paused, as if considering my words carefully. Liberating, shedding the dead weight from my life and stepping into my own self-made fortune has been euphoric, really. A heavy silence fell as Belinda absorbed the not-so-subtle dig at my ex-husband and her new money-grubbing beau. But her desperation for hollow status symbols eventually overpowered any reluctance. You know, I always had a feeling you were too good for that loser, she cooed, her phony sweetness morphing into undisguised envy, especially now that he's squandering away those lottery millions on ridiculous pipe dreams that are doomed to fail. I inhaled sharply, equal parts disgusted and infuriated by her blatant attempt to drive a wedge between Derek and myself. As if basking in her ill-gotten gains wasn't enough, she had to try and twist the knife more. Well, you're certainly free to think what you want about Derek's life choices. I replied coolly, catching Nora's gaze and giving an infinitesimal nod. She sprang into action immediately, keying up the prepared video files and patching through to the live feed I had routed to every major news network. Although, I continued smoothly, staring dead ahead at the camera light now blinking, I think the world deserves to hear your take on things from your own lying, opportunistic mouth. There was a confused pause before Belinda's sugary tone hardened with suspicion. Lila? What are you talking ab? But her words were drowned out by a deafening feedback whine as our call was broadcast on every screen from Times Square to L.A. Her perfectly made-up face, twisted in bewilderment, suddenly plastered across millions of homes. You see, Belinda, I stated, my voice ringing with furious conviction, my newfound wealth is just as much of a facade as your self-proclaimed influence over the sad, desperate fools who hang on your every Instagram post. Leaning forward, I braced my hands on the desk and leveled my gaze directly at the camera's unblinking eye. The truth is, we've all been taken for a ride by two outrageous con artists, consumed by delusion, greed, and their own narcissistic pursuit of fame and fortune at any cost. My finger stabbed viciously at the image of Derek now appearing beside Belinda, his expression one of abject horror as he realized our private conversation was being broadcast for the world to hear. This low-life scumbag you've so readily attached your vapid ambitions to didn't just cheat on his wife and mother of his children, he tried to claim the entirety of a lottery jackpot. He didn't even win alone. I was shaking with rage, but a vicious sort of glee burned within me at seeing the blood drain from Derek's face as the video feed switched to authenticated footage of him, Alex, and I purchasing the fateful lotto ticket years ago. Every duplicitous act, every underhanded scheme, every conniving lie that both Derek and Belinda had spun to feed their ego, I unleashed it all in one brutal, damning torrent, letting the truth scorch away their fragile delusions before a captive audience of millions. And as the look of smug indifference melted off Belinda's face to be replaced by abject horror, I felt a twisted sense of gratification at the fractures already splintering through her and Derek's sad, self-indulgent fantasies. This was only the beginning of their downfall. I would make sure of it. I would not rest until their hollow lives were shattered into a million pieces, paying penance for every ounce of pain and disillusionment they'd put me through. Steeling my nerves, I met Derek's terrified gaze burning through the screen and allowed a cold smirk to crease my lips. This is for all those times you accused me of never believing in you, Derek. Well, believe me when I say, this nightmare is only just beginning. The ballroom was packed, every eye locked on the center stage as I ascended the steps and approached the podium. My heels clicked loudly against the polished wood, the only sound in that breathless hush. This was it, the final phase of my months-long vendetta. One last chance to drive the knife into the rotting heart of Derek and Belinda's sham relationship before a crowd of their erstwhile admirers. One corner of my mouth curled into a vindictive smirk. They'd slithered their way onto the guest list for this self-congratulatory gala, under the delusion they could ingratiate themselves, soil their way into high society's good graces. Little did those two vapid fools realize they were the ones being played for fools. The air was thick with palpable tension as I reached the podium. Leaning forward, I let my eyes bore into the squirming figures of Derek and Belinda situated at a front table, their arrogant expressions crumbling beneath my unrelenting glare. Friends, esteemed colleagues, I began, my voice rippling through the cavernous chamber. I'd like to extend my gratitude for your presence here tonight at this annual celebration of entrepreneurial spirit and community innovation. Murmurs of polite applause spread through the crowd before I silenced them with an upraised hand. However, as many of you are no doubt aware, there exists a serpent lurking in our midst. I paused, letting the weight of my next words sink in. A vile deceiver who has brazenly perverted the symbols of success and self-made prosperity we honor here for his own ego-driven delusions of grandeur. Belinda bristled at the obvious slight, shooting an accusatory glare at Derek, who shrank in his chair like a kicked dog. How bitterly ironic that his craving for validation had turned the woman he sought it from against him within moments. You all know who I'm referring to, I stated, my lip curling with disgust. Derek Jefferson, A narcissistic, emotionally stunted leech who lied, cheated, and manipulated everyone around him in pursuit of the trappings of fortune. It was like a dam bursting at those words, the once polite crowd erupting into shouts of condemnation and outrage. Caught completely off guard by my vicious assault, Derek jerked upright, his eyes swiveling in panic. "That's not true," he barked futilely over the din, before pointing a shaking finger at me. "She's the one who never believed in me, who tried to tear me down at every turn." The crowd's scorn intensified tenfold at his pitiful deflection, hisses and boos raining down on him until his face purpled. "Silence!" I roared, raising my voice above the furor. As the room stilled once more, I leaned towards the podium, lips curling into a sneer. "I did believe in you, Derek. I believed you were a good man once, until your arrogance and greed twisted you into this delusional, hate-filled stranger before us now." My steely gaze landed on Belinda next, watching her shrink under my withering contempt. "As for your pathetic sidekick, well, need I say more than she's living proof of the depths to which you've allowed your ambition and ego to corrode your morality and self-worth?" Slamming my palms on the podium, I straightened, fury blazing in my eyes. "So go ahead, shroud yourselves in as much counterfeit wealth and materialism as you desire to mask your inescapable insecurities. At your empty, rotted cores, you're nothing more than snake oil salesmen, profiteering off lies and exploiting the ambitions of others for your own soulless gain." From the back of the ballroom, a loud cry cut through the silence. "You make me sick, man." I smirked, recognizing Alex's voice as he stepped forward, derision etched across his face as he locked eyes with the man he once considered a friend. "All this time using people and spinning lies to support your sad power trip? And for what?" As the crowd swelled around him with murmurs of agreement, Alex jabbed an accusing finger at the stunned pair. "You gave up relationships, sacrificed integrity, your entire value system, all for this flagrant ego trip of a sham empire. Well, joke's on you, Jefferson, because the only thing more bankrupt than your finances is your self-respect." Somewhere within the throng of voices condemning them, I heard Belinda's shrill tones pleading with Derek for answers, demanding to know the extent of his latest betrayal. Their toxic, symbiotic relationship of narcissism and self-delusion finally fracturing under its own weight. At the eye of the storm, Derek resembled a scared child, stunned into silence by the harsh, unrelenting reality crashing down upon him. The karmic wheel spinning payback for his inflicted unraveling. Meeting my gaze one last time, his eyes held the slightest flicker of raw emotion. Fear, betrayal, simmering hatred, all roiling together. In that moment I reflected not on the monster he'd become, but the man whose love and faith I'd once cherished. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anguish, just empty vindication. And as the roaring wave of scorn swallowed him whole, I turned my back and strode away, content to let the tides of public opinion and karma's bitter justice sweep Derek under for good, this time. The roar of the crowd was deafening as I stepped out into the marbled lobby, flanked by Nora and Alex. But the vengeful cheers and chants felt strangely hollow, like a dull thud reverberating through my bones. "I can't believe we finally did it," Nora breathed, her eyes alight with vindictive triumph. That oily snake and his cheap tramp got exactly what was coming to them. I should have felt elated in that moment, relieved that my months-long quest to expose Derek and Belinda's sham had reached its climactic peak. Instead, I only felt numb. Perhaps it was the sobering reminder that no amount of public shaming or loss of status could undo the damage of Derek's ultimate betrayal. Or maybe, deep down, I mourned having to bury the shredded remnants of the man I once loved. A familiar voice shattered my turbulent thoughts. Well, if it isn't the mastermind herself. Derek's acidic sneer hit me like a slap as he pushed through the crowd still loitering outside, Belinda trailing miserably behind him. You ruined everything." The blonde's voice cracked with equal parts fury and despair as she rounded on me. "All that effort, all those lies and manipulations trying to claw my way into high society, undone by your sad, jealous revenge ploy." I regarded her coolly as she fought to maintain her poise, straightening her bedazzled gown with trembling hands. "I may have been delusionally chasing vapid social status and wealth, but at least I still have my dignity. She spat the words with as much venom as she could muster amidst the tattered ruins of her facade. "You're a sad, empty husk masquerading as a self-righteous icon of morality," Derek hissed, his eyes glittering with pure venom. "But I see the truth. Lila, you're just as desperate and spiteful as the day I left you behind." His lips twisted into a mocking leer. "Couldn't handle the fact that I'd finally surpassed your meager expectations for me, risen above the limitations you tried shackling me. The delusional rant was cut off by a harsh slap, the crack echoing through the lobby. Derek recoiled, clutching his reddened cheek as Alex stepped forward, eyes blazing. "That's enough out of you, you arrogant bastard." His voice dripped with disgust. "The fact you're still trying to play the martyr here just proves how completely delusional you are." Derek opened his mouth to respond, but Alex barreled onwards. "You were my friend once, Derek. We had dreams, ambitions, but you let greed and narcissism consume you until you alienated everyone who gave a damn." Shaking his head slowly, he glanced over at the shuddering wreck of a woman clinging to Derek's arm. "Both of you deserve each other's vapid, hollow company, living the rest of your days shrouded in self-denial and meaningless status trappings." Alex's gaze hardened into a glare as it swung back to lock with Derek's, his voice turning to steel. "I just hope, when you hit rock bottom after poisoning yourselves on those delusions, that you remember what it cost you to throw away everyone who actually gave a damn." A tense silence fell over the lobby, until I felt Nora's hand on my arm, pulling me gently away. "Come on, sis, let's leave these sad losers to rot in the mess of their own making." As we turned to head for the exit, Belinda's voice rang out, desperate and pleading. "Wait!" She lurched forward, clutching Derek's arm in a white-knuckled grip. Just tell me one thing, Lila." Her eyes searched mine, wide and haunted. Is it true? Was everything a lie? This whole relationship, Derek's ambitions, our entire future planned out together? For a moment I considered lying to her, letting her delude herself a little longer before the imminent crash back to reality. But one look at the broken shell of a woman before me, and I knew even the slightest white lie would be too cruel. "Yes, Belinda," I stated simply, letting the truth sink in like a dagger between her ribs. "It was all a lie, just empty delusions built on a foundation of greed and ego." Derek regarded me with a mix of fury and dawning horror, as if the gravity of what he'd sacrificed was just starting to take hold. But I felt no pity, no sorrow, only the faintest twinge of lamentful nostalgia for the man whose potential had led me to fall for him once upon a time. Lacing my fingers through Nora's, I guided us past the dissolving wreckage of Derek and Belinda's sham relationship without a second glance. As the revolving doors closed behind us, I steeled myself for the new chapter awaiting me beyond this painful era. Stripping the scales of delusion from my eyes was just the start of a long journey towards rediscovering my self-worth and independence. But at least now I could begin that path unburdened by the hollow shackles of arrogance and lies that had dragged me down for far too long. Chapter 8. New Beginnings. 6 months later, I stood in the shadow of the gleaming high-rise that housed my new business headquarters and took a deep, contented breath. The brisk spring air was a welcome tonic, a sensory reminder of the fresh start and rebirth I was finally allowing myself after so many months of being bogged down in darkness and anger. "Can you believe this place, sis?" Nora looped her arm through mine, her eyes shining with pride as she surveyed our newly established empire. All stemming from that vindictive little revenge scheme that put that douchebag Derek in his place. My lips quirked into a small smile. In the aftermath of my very public dismantling of my ex-husband's rampant delusions, the settlement I received from our divorce proceedings, coupled with my share of the lottery winnings, had afforded me ample opportunity to invest in new ventures. And with Nora's marketing and branding genius as my co-pilot, we rapidly transformed that influx of cash into a burgeoning multimedia corporation dedicated to empowering women who'd suffered at the hands of greedy, self-serving men like Derek. It was strangely fitting, really, allowing the ashes of my former marriage to smolder and ignite the flames of a new, self-made legacy. A firm rebuttal to the notion I had ever tried to stifle Derek's dreams and ambitions. The guy was a delusional, narcissistic train wreck from day one. I just happened to be the one miraculously cashing in on the fallout. You know Alex is still reeling over us donating a chunk of our launch capital to his counseling program for disadvantaged youth. Nora shook her head in amazement. Guy was practically in tears when he found out. He deserves it, I stated simply, squeezing her arm. God knows he endured enough turmoil sticking by us through the darkest stretches of that whole sordid mess with Derek and Belinda. A twisted smirk crossed my lips as I recalled the high-profile legal battle erupted when Alex contested the lottery winnings. Derek's snarling, bombastic attempts to claim the whole jackpot for himself were swiftly shut down by a mountain of authenticated evidence and a restraining order. Meanwhile, Belinda's desperate gambit to sue me for defamation and emotional damages imploded before it even left the ground after the avalanche of receipts I produced, exposing her as a shameless con artist and grifter only out for self-gain. By the time the dust settled, she and Derek were both pariah, bankrupted by legal fees and public scrutiny into their grifting ways. The power couple delusion was shattered utterly, and through it all, Alex remained a steady, supportive ally through the darkest days. A true friend who never judged, only encouraged me to channel the vindictive anger into something constructive. That thought made my steps lighter as I strode into the towering lobby, drinking in the sights and sounds of my creation coming to life. Just off the polished marble floors, a cluster of women from our marketing team huddled around a television monitor, eagerly reviewing edits for our latest female empowerment campaign. "Looking amazing, ladies," I called out, eliciting a chorus of cheers and warm greetings. Behind the front desk, my new assistant looked up and waved, crisp and professional on the outside, with the soul of a fearless fighter against injustice. That was the foundation Nora and I were determined to establish, a blazing torch to illuminate every dark path other women might tread on their quest for rebirth and renewal. As I rode the elevator upwards, my mind drifted back to those dark days when Derek's callous betrayal had nearly broken me. If someone had told me then about the self-made phoenix I would emerge as down the line, I might have laughed at the absurdity of it. Yet here I was, at the precipice of an empire built from the ashes of delusion and deceit. An unstoppable force, fueled by a simple credo: never let ego, complacency, or the agendas of others blind you to your own potential and self-worth. The doors slid open to reveal my corner office awaiting, a sprawling sunlit sanctuary of inspiration and possibility. Striding to the floor-to-ceiling windows, I let my gaze roam across the endless cityscape sprawled out below. This life, this invigorating hustle and soaring ambition, it was the polar opposite to the empty, vapid delusions Derek once accused me of stunting. And in that moment, I felt pity for him more than anything. An eternity confined to his own narcissistic hell while I flourished in the light. That was the ultimate revenge. As I settled into my plush leather chair, the phone began ringing shrilly, jarring me from my reverie. With a self-assured smile, I scooped up the receiver. "Lila Jefferson," I answered crisply. "Let's get to work."
Trusted my girlfriend with my mental struggles. She had me put in a psych hold, and now she tell me this. So yeah, I'm not exactly in the best spot right now. I'm 29, working this job that's supposed to pay the bills and give me some sense of purpose. But let's be real, it barely does either. I'm busting my ass for what? To barely scrape by? I'm pretty sure a lot of people reading this get what I'm saying. It's like you're just grinding away, hoping things will get easier, but they don't. And maybe for some people that's just life, right? But for me, it's been different lately, like way darker. I don't know exactly when this whole mental mess started. I mean, I'd love to say I was some super happy dude who suddenly woke up to a bad day and everything went downhill, but it's not that simple. It's more like a slow crawl into this weird dark pit. Like, one day you realize the thoughts you're having aren't just the regular "man, this sucks" kind of thoughts. They're like, what's the point, you know? And it's terrifying because I don't actually want to hurt myself. I'm not actively planning anything, but my mind keeps going there even when I don't want it to. It's like it's sneaking up on me when I'm not paying attention. It's what they call suicidal ideation, which basically means these thoughts just creep up, even though I have zero plans to actually do anything. I'll try to paint a picture for you because maybe some of you haven't been there, and it might sound overdramatic. It's like this constant weight on my mind. Some days I'd wake up and go to work, go through the motions, but inside it's like a switch flipped. Everything's numb, like I'm just going through the day on autopilot. It's weird because nobody can see it. To everyone else, I'm just the same guy, doing my job, showing up. But inside, it's like everything's gray, heavy, and no matter what I do, I can't shake it. I thought I could just push through, honestly. I mean, I've dealt with stress before, right? But this is different. Usually I just throw myself into work, keep busy, try to ignore the bad stuff, and hope it goes away. But no matter how hard I worked or distracted myself, these thoughts just kept creeping back in. It's like trying to keep a lid on a pot that's already boiling over. You can push it down for a while, but eventually it's going to spill. I'd get these thoughts too at the worst times. Like I'm standing at work, supposed to be paying attention, and suddenly my mind's just drifting off, thinking about how easy it'd be to just disappear. And I'd snap out of it, thinking, what the hell is wrong with me? But then it'd happen again and again. It starts messing with your head. I'd go home and just sit there, trying to figure out why I can't shake it off. Why I can't just, I don't know, be happy? Or at least normal? It's this constant battle in my head and I'm losing. I know, it sounds dramatic. But if you've ever been there, you get it. And if you haven't, trust me when I say it's not something I'd wish on anyone. It's like being trapped in this invisible cage, and no matter what you do, you can't get out. Every day, it's just this fight to keep going, to keep pretending everything's okay when deep down, you know it's not. And the scariest part? I didn't tell anyone, not a single soul, because who wants to hear that? Who wants to be the person that people look at and think, oh, he's broken? So I kept it all in, hoping it'd just go away. And then came the worst days. These are the ones that really stick with me. I'd come home after a long day, exhausted, and just sit there staring at the wall. Not even thinking, just staring. My phone would buzz, people trying to reach out, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. It was like every ounce of energy I had was used up just to get through the day, and I had nothing left for anyone else. I'd sit in silence, sometimes for hours, with this voice in the back of my head whispering that it'd be easier to just give up. Not that I'd ever actually do it, but the thought was always there, lurking, like some shadow I couldn't get rid of. After a few months of this, I started to realize that maybe I couldn't handle this on my own. And let me tell you, that was a hard pill to swallow. I've always been the guy who deals with his own stuff, who doesn't rely on anyone else. But this was different. It wasn't something I could just shrug off or ignore. So, after a lot of back and forth in my own head, I finally decided to open up to my girlfriend. I mean, we've been together for 4 years, and she's always been there for me. If there was anyone who'd understand, it'd be her, right? So, one night, we're just sitting on the couch watching some mindless TV show, and I decided to go for it. I told her I'd been struggling lately, that things felt dark, and that I'd been having these thoughts. And let me tell you, that was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I could barely get the words out. I was so damn worried about how she'd react, but I didn't have anyone else I could trust with this. She just sat there listening, and I thought, okay, maybe this'll actually help. I kept explaining, trying to make her understand that I wasn't planning anything, that I just needed someone to hear me out. And she nodded, said she understood, and I actually felt a bit of relief, like maybe I'd finally found a way to dig myself out of this hole. I thought, maybe this'll be okay, maybe I'll be okay. Looking back, maybe I shouldn't have expected so much. I mean, she's young, only 22, and probably didn't know how to handle something like this. But at that moment, I genuinely thought I'd done the right thing by telling her. For the first time in a while, I felt like maybe I wasn't so alone in this. I thought opening up was the first step to getting better, that I'd finally found a way to deal with these thoughts and move forward. But as I'd come to learn, things weren't that simple. So I left off where I finally opened up to my girlfriend. Honestly, I felt this weird sense of relief after telling her everything, like maybe this was finally the first step to pulling myself out of that mental mess. But what happened next was something I didn't see coming at all. After our talk, I was feeling, I don't know, lighter, I guess. I figured I'd go grab some snacks and clear my head for a bit, so I told her I'd be right back. It was just a quick trip down the street, something to get my mind off things. I thought everything was fine between us, like maybe we'd broken through a wall or something. I wasn't expecting her to do anything drastic. But by the time I came back, the whole situation flipped in a way I'd never imagined. I pull into my driveway and immediately notice 2 cop cars parked outside my house, and I'm just sitting there in my car, staring at these flashing lights, totally confused. My first thought was maybe there was some kind of emergency in the neighborhood or something, but when I got out of the car, one of the officers approached me, and he had this look like he already knew exactly who I was. "Are you my name?" he asks, and I'm just nodding, Still not processing any of it. I mean, my heart's racing, and I'm running through every possible thing that could have gone wrong. Then he says, "We got a call from someone concerned for your safety." Right then it clicked. I knew this wasn't about anything outside. It was about me. My girlfriend had called the cops on me, and suddenly that feeling of relief I'd had just a few minutes ago, completely gone. I felt betrayed, like I'd let her into my head, and she'd taken that trust and turned it against me. I tried to explain to the officers that it was a misunderstanding. I told them I wasn't planning on doing anything to myself, that I'd just been going through a rough time, and I'd talk to her about it, thinking it'd help. But they weren't hearing any of it. They kept insisting that they were there to help and that it was for my own good. At this point, I was pissed. But what could I do? They told me they were going to take me to the hospital for a psychiatric evaluation, and it wasn't really up for discussion. I tried to argue, but it was like talking to a wall. One of them said, "Look, we're just here to make sure you're safe." Safe? I'd been sitting in my car, getting snacks, and now I was supposed to be some kind of danger to myself? It didn't make sense, but they didn't care about any of that. They just followed protocol. Then it hits me. If the cops are here, who else did she tell? And right on cue, my phone buzzes. It's my mom, freaking out in a million texts, asking me what's going on, why I'm in such a bad place, and all this stuff. Turns out, my girlfriend had called my parents too. I'm guessing she thought they'd support her decision to call the cops, maybe thinking this was what I needed or whatever. But all I felt was this wave of anger and frustration. The people who were supposed to be there for me, my girlfriend and my family, had somehow all turned into, I don't even know what, but definitely not the support I thought I needed. So there I am, being escorted by the cops to the hospital. I'm sitting in the back of a police car like some criminal, even though I'd done nothing wrong. I'm fuming, but I don't even know who I'm mad at more. My girlfriend for putting me in this mess, or myself for thinking I could trust anyone with what I was going through. We get to the hospital, and they bring me to this side area, and the nurse is already there waiting. She starts asking me a bunch of questions about my mental state, how I'm feeling, all that stuff, and I'm sitting there thinking, none of this is real. Like, this whole situation just feels like a twisted joke. I told the nurse straight up that I wasn't planning on hurting myself, that this was all some misunderstanding blown way out of proportion. But she just nods and says, "Well, we'll need to do a full evaluation to make sure." The whole time, all I could think was how everything just spiraled out of control. I'd opened up to my girlfriend, thinking it would help. And here I was in some cold clinical room being treated like a danger to myself. They took my phone, my wallet, everything. It felt surreal, like I'd somehow lost control of my own life just because I was honest for once. I mean, isn't that what everyone says to do? Talk to someone if you're struggling. But look where that got me. And of course, the waiting game started. I sat in this tiny, uncomfortable room for hours, with nothing to do but replay everything in my head, every thought, every detail of that conversation with my girlfriend. I kept wondering if there was something I could have said differently, something that wouldn't have set off this chain reaction. But no matter how I tried to make sense of it, it just didn't add up. She knew I wasn't actively planning anything, and I thought I'd made that clear. So why call the cops? Why call my parents? Why blow everything up? At some point, a doctor came in and started the whole evaluation process. He was calm, asked me about my thoughts, how long I'd been feeling like this, and all that. I answered as best as I could, but it's hard to explain something you're barely understanding yourself. I could see him jotting down notes, looking up every now and then, and it was obvious he didn't really get it. He kept asking questions in this clinical, detached way that just made me feel even worse. Like I was just another case he was trying to check off his list. By the time they finally wrapped up the initial evaluation, I was drained, both physically and mentally. I didn't have the energy to keep explaining myself, and I just accepted that nobody was really going to understand. They weren't interested in helping. They were just doing what they were supposed to do. Protocol, procedures, checklists. I was just another number to them. I'm not going to lie. Sitting in that room with nothing to do but stare at the walls, I felt betrayed. Completely. I kept thinking about my girlfriend, my family, the people who were supposed to care. I'd trusted them, opened up in a way I'd never done before, and now, here I was, alone in some sterile room, treated like a danger to myself when all I wanted was someone to actually listen, to understand. But instead, I was labeled and sorted into some category, and now they had me stuck in this mess. By the time they told me I'd have to stay for further observation, I wasn't even surprised. It was like the whole thing had taken on a life of its own, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I just sat there, feeling defeated, wondering if I'd ever be able to look at these people in my life the same way again. I'm not sure how to describe the feeling of being admitted into a psych ward, especially when you're there against your will. The second they took my phone and wallet, I realized how little control I had left. You think of hospitals as these places where they're supposed to help you, right? Well, this place didn't feel like help. It felt like prison. Everything was cold and gray, like the entire building was designed to drain whatever hope you had left. And the people? They treated you like you were already broken beyond repair. After what felt like hours of waiting around, they finally brought me to this cramped room that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 80s. It had a single bed with a thin mattress, a chair, and a tiny table. The walls were this faded beige color, peeling in spots, and there was this smell, a mix of bleach and something stale. I sat on the bed, staring at the walls, trying to wrap my head around how I'd ended up here. The staff, they didn't talk to you unless they absolutely had to. It's like they didn't see you as a person, just another case they were dealing with. I tried asking one of the nurses how long I'd have to be here, and she just shrugged, mumbled something about evaluations, and walked away. No explanations, no real answers, just cold, blank stares and people moving around like you're invisible. Then came the worst part. My roommate. I don't know what I expected, but definitely not him. The guy was convinced he was some kind of god or prophet or something, always muttering to himself and occasionally screaming at the walls. First night in, I woke up to him smashing his head against the wall, leaving these bloody smears as he went. When I asked the staff if he was okay, they just brushed it off like it was no big deal. He does that sometimes, one of them said, completely unfazed. The whole experience was like that. There was no peace, no privacy, nothing that made you feel even a little bit human. The lights stayed on 24/7, and someone checked on you every half hour, so sleep was impossible. I'd lie there, exhausted but unable to drift off, listening to the sounds of other patients shuffling down the hall, doors creaking, and that constant hum of fluorescent lights. Every noise, every shadow, it was like the place was designed to keep you on edge. Meals were another level of awful. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner were all this tasteless gray mush that they insisted was balanced. I tried eating it first, but I could barely get it down. After a day or so, I just stopped bothering. What was the point? It felt like I was being punished, like I'd done something wrong, even though all I'd done was open up to someone I thought I could trust. And then there were the meds. Oh man, the meds. The doctors had decided I needed something to calm me down, despite me telling them over and over that I wasn't a danger to myself. But it didn't matter. They had their system, and I was just another tick on their checklist. They handed me these pills without even telling me what they were. When I refused to take them, they just stared at me and said, "You either take these, or we'll have to use other measures." Basically, they were going to force feed me the stuff if I didn't cooperate. So yeah, I took them. And let me tell you, whatever they gave me, it was brutal. Within half an hour, I felt like my brain was wrapped in cotton. Everything was blurry and slow. I couldn't think straight. Couldn't even string together a full sentence. It was like I was floating somewhere outside myself, watching this whole nightmare unfold, but completely powerless to do anything about it. They'd call it treatment, but to me, it felt like they were stripping away any shred of control I had left. I spent 3 days in that place. 3 long, miserable days where the only thing I did was sit in that dingy room and stare at the walls. The staff tried to get me to talk, but I wasn't interested. I knew they weren't listening. Not really. I'd already told them the truth, but they didn't care. I was just another body they had to deal with. So I clammed up, refused to speak, and just waited for it to be over. On the second day, my parents and girlfriend came by to visit. I saw them through the tiny window in my room, talking to one of the nurses, probably asking to see me. But I didn't want to see them. I was done with them. They were the ones who put me here, who decided this was what I needed, without even asking me how I felt about it. So when the nurse came to tell me I had visitors, I just shook my head and said I wasn't interested. I could see the nurse's face drop, like maybe she thought I was being ungrateful or something. But I didn't care. I was angry. Angry at all of them for thinking they knew what was best for me. Angry that I'd let myself trust them enough to open up, only to have it backfire in the worst way possible. They didn't understand, and at that point, I wasn't sure I even wanted them to. Time felt strange in that place. It was like everything slowed down and blurred together. Hours felt like days, and every second I was there, I felt more and more trapped. It was like being in some kind of twisted purgatory where you're just stuck with no way out. The only thing that kept me going was knowing that eventually, they'd have to let me go. I hadn't done anything wrong. I wasn't a danger to myself, and they had no proof to keep me there. By the end of it, I was so mentally and physically drained that I barely recognized myself. I felt hollow, like whatever fight I had in me had been worn down to nothing. The doctors finally decided they didn't have enough to keep me any longer, and they told me I'd be released soon. But even then, they acted like they were doing me some kind of favor, like I should be grateful they were letting me go. All I could think was, I just want out. I wanted out of that place, away from those people, and as far from the whole experience as possible. They'd turned what was already a rough time in my life into something way worse, all because I trusted the wrong person. And as they took me out of that room and walked me down those bleak hallways one last time, I made up my mind about one thing. I was done with all of them. When they finally let me out, it wasn't some big relief like I thought it would be. I felt numb, like whatever part of me that should have felt grateful for being free had been left back in that psych ward. They handed me my stuff, my wallet, my phone, like I was some kid who'd just been punished and was finally allowed to go back outside. But the second I took my things, I just wanted to leave. I didn't say a word to any of the staff, didn't even look back. I was done with them, done with that place. And of course, there they were, waiting for me outside, my parents and my girlfriend. They all had these expressions like they were relieved but also worried, and I could already see it. The questions, the "Are you okay?" and "Did it help?" expressions written all over their faces. But I wasn't about to play into that. I'd already been through enough. I didn't owe them anything. They all started talking at once the second they saw me. My mom was asking if I was okay. My dad tried to give me one of those weird side hugs, and my girlfriend was going on about how she'd missed me, how she was glad I was safe now. And honestly, I just couldn't take it. I felt this wave of anger bubble up inside me. All I could see was them making that choice for me, deciding what was best without even listening. They'd thrown me in there like I was some project they needed to fix, and now they wanted me to pretend like everything was fine. I didn't say a word to them. Not one. I just brushed past them, started walking away. They kept calling my name, asking where I was going, but I didn't stop. I had too much going on in my head to even care at that point. I just kept walking, barely noticing that it had started to rain. Somehow, that felt right, like the whole world was matching my mood. Heavy, gray, cold. I didn't even care about the rain soaking through my clothes. It was like, after everything, getting wet was the least of my problems. I must have walked a good 3 miles before I finally got back to my place. I hadn't stopped once, hadn't even thought about getting a ride or calling a cab. I just walked, letting the anger and hurt push me forward, one step after another, until I made it back. By the time I reached my door, I was drenched and exhausted, but something about that walk felt like it cleared my head a bit. Or maybe I just pushed everything so deep down that it was like I couldn't feel anything anymore. Either way, I didn't care. I was home, and that's all that mattered. When I stepped inside, my girlfriend had followed me. I hadn't even noticed she'd trailed me back, but there she was, dripping wet, looking at me like I was some kind of wounded animal. "We need to talk," she said, but I was done with talking. I'd already said everything that mattered back when I'd opened up to her, and look where that got me. I didn't want to hear her excuses, her justifications. I didn't want to hear any of it. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "We're done." Just like that. No explanation, no trying to soften the blow. I was exhausted, drained, and I didn't have the energy to play nice. She started to cry, saying she'd done what she thought was best, that she'd only wanted to help me. But her idea of help had been throwing me in a psych ward without even asking me what I wanted. How was that supposed to help? How was I supposed to feel safe with someone who could just decide what's best for me like that, without even a real conversation? I told her she had until the end of the week to pack her stuff and get out of my house. It felt harsh, but at that moment I didn't care. She kept trying to explain, kept going on about how much she cared about me, but I'd heard enough. I'd trusted her, thought she'd understand what I was going through, and instead, she'd turned my life upside down. Maybe some people would say I was being too hard on her, but if they'd been through what I had, they'd get it. You can't just throw someone into a place like that and expect things to go back to normal afterward. After she finally left, I sat there in my empty apartment staring at the walls. It was quiet, so damn quiet, and for the first time I really let myself feel the weight of everything. All the anger, the betrayal, it all hit me at once. I felt alone, but in a way it was better than pretending to be surrounded by people who didn't really care about what I wanted. They'd all acted like they were helping me, but none of them had actually asked me what I needed. They'd just made that choice for me, like I wasn't even there. My phone started buzzing with texts from my parents, probably worried that I'd cut off my girlfriend like that, but I didn't even look at them. I was done. I'd spent so much time trying to make everyone else happy, trying to play nice, that I'd forgotten what it meant to actually look out for myself. And now, after everything, I didn't have the energy to deal with their guilt trips and their explanations. Over the next few days, my parents kept trying to call, sending these long, guilt-laden texts about how my girlfriend was just trying to help, how I should forgive her, give her another chance. They couldn't get it. They'd never understand what it was like to be locked up in that place, treated like I was broken just because I was struggling. I knew they thought they were doing the right thing, but to me, it felt like they'd taken the one thing I had left, my right to decide what I wanted for myself, and thrown it away. By the end of the week, my girlfriend had packed up her things and left. I didn't say goodbye, didn't even look at her when she walked out the door. I was past that. She'd made her choice, and I'd made mine. It was like a part of me had died back there, in that psych ward, the part that believed people could understand without judgment, without trying to control me. I didn't need people who thought they knew better than I did what was best for me. I didn't realize how freeing it would feel to finally set that boundary, to tell the people who had hurt me that they didn't get to decide my life anymore. Yeah, it left me alone, but at least I was alone on my own terms. And as strange as it sounds, that gave me a kind of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. So now I'm sitting here, finally by myself, and I can't shake this question. Was I the A*** hole? I mean, I'm aware this whole situation's messed up. I'm not blind to the fact that they thought they were helping me. My girlfriend, my parents, they did what they did because they care. I get that, okay? But it still feels like they all just completely bulldozed over me, over what I wanted and needed, and now I'm left with nothing but this huge mess, and everyone around me telling me I'm wrong. It's like they thought they knew best, right? My girlfriend especially. I told her some really personal stuff I hadn't even really admitted to myself, and she took that as a green light to call the cops on me. I mean, who does that? She knew I wasn't planning to do anything drastic. I'd told her clear as day that I was struggling, but not actually in danger. And instead of actually listening to what I needed, she just went nuclear and dragged my family into it too, thinking that would somehow help. And my parents, man, they acted like they were so surprised, like they couldn't believe I was going through something like this. But I don't know. Part of me feels like they should have seen the signs. They know how rough work has been, how I've been drowning in bills, how every day has felt like a struggle lately. It's not like I'm hiding that part of my life. I mean, I live paycheck to paycheck. They knew that. They knew my job's been grinding me down. And when it finally got too heavy, and I reached out, they all acted like I was a problem that needed fixing, rather than just someone who needed a bit of understanding. So now I've cut everyone off. My girlfriend's gone, and I've blocked my parents' numbers. I made it clear that if they keep pushing, I'll go to the cops for trespassing. And yeah, I know that sounds extreme. I'm aware that to anyone else, I probably sound like a guy who's lost it. But if you'd been through what I went through, you'd get it. When the people you trust most decide that their version of help involves locking you up, it changes things. It changes how you see them and how you see yourself. And then there's the money side of things. Because, of course, insurance didn't cover my little trip to the psych ward. So now, on top of everything else, I'm saddled with a $10,000 bill for something I never wanted, never asked for, and definitely didn't need. Every time I think about it, it makes my blood boil. Like, I was already buried in bills, struggling to make ends meet, and now I have this giant debt sitting over my head because my girlfriend thought she was saving me. If I didn't laugh, I'd cry, honestly. People keep telling me I should reach out to the hospital, try to get the bill reduced. I get it. It's practical advice. But the whole idea of even dealing with them again just fills me with dread. I don't want to talk to anyone there. Don't want to relive any of it. It's like that place left this scar. And every time I think about doing something about the bill, it just reopens. Maybe it sounds ridiculous, but it's the truth. Right now, I'd rather let that bill sit unpaid than have to explain myself to some billing department that probably doesn't care anyway. And then there's the question of what comes next. Because I'm sitting here with pretty much no support system left. I'm on my own, and that's fine. It's better than having people around who don't actually get it. But there's this nagging thought in the back of my head, this tiny, annoying voice saying, what if they were right? What if you were overreacting? And I hate that thought, because it makes me doubt everything. It's like they've got this grip on me, even after I've pushed them all away. Like no matter what I do, I can't fully escape their version of help. A few days ago, I was scrolling through Reddit, trying to distract myself, and I came across a post from someone else who'd gone through something similar. They talked about feeling betrayed by the people closest to them, about how nobody actually understood what they needed. And I swear, it was like looking in a mirror. I wanted to reach through the screen and tell them I got it, that I knew exactly how they felt. It made me wonder if maybe I'm not as alone in this as I think. Maybe there are other people out there who've been through the same crap, who've had their trust shattered by the people they thought were supposed to care. But at the end of the day, that's all online. None of those people know me, and I don't know them. And as much as it helps to know that others get it, it doesn't really solve anything. I'm still here, still alone, still carrying this weight that nobody else seems to understand. And maybe that's my new reality. Maybe it's just me now, figuring things out one day at a time. I keep replaying that day in my head, wondering if I could have done something differently. Maybe if I'd explained things better, made it clearer that I just needed someone to listen, none of this would have happened. Or maybe it was inevitable. Maybe they would have done this no matter how I'd framed it because they couldn't see past their own fear. I don't know. And maybe I'll never know. All I know is that now, I'm the one left dealing with the fallout. So here I am, asking the internet, am I the a-hole for cutting them all off? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like the only option I had left. I mean, if I can't trust the people who were supposed to have my back, then what's the point? I'm not going to keep them around just to make myself feel better. I need people in my life who actually listen, who see me as more than just a problem to fix. And if that means going it alone for now, so be it. Maybe one day I'll be ready to let them back in. Maybe, when enough time has passed, I'll be able to look back and see things differently. But right now, I'm still angry, still hurt, and still carrying that $10,000 reminder of their help. So was I the A*** hole for saying enough is enough? Because honestly, I don't think I am. But I'm open to hearing what you guys think. Mom married her new husband 2 weeks after he moved in and adopts his kids from other women, ignored me and made me babysit them. But in the end, karma hit her hard. All right, so my mom had me when she was 18, fresh out of high school and totally unprepared. But hey, what teenager is ready to be a parent? My dad? Some guy she met in college? I never met him. And honestly, I'm not even sure he knows I exist. For years, it was just me and my mom, bouncing around, figuring things out on our own. But here's the kicker. I didn't even know my grandparents existed until I was like 10 years old. Yeah, my mom didn't want to move back to her hometown or tell anyone about me. She just kept it all quiet, pretending like it was some kind of adventure, just the two of us against the world. And at first, I didn't question it. I thought it was normal to not have family around. But when I started school and saw other kids with their grandparents at events, it hit me. I didn't even know if I had grandparents. One day, out of nowhere, my mom says, "We're going to meet your grandparents." She said it so casually, like we were going to the grocery store or something. I was confused, obviously, because I had never even heard about these people before, and now we're just going to meet them? I asked her all these questions, like, why haven't we seen them before? And, are they nice? She didn't give me any answers, just kept saying, "You'll see." So we pack up our stuff and head to her hometown. It's this small town, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone else's business. My mom was clearly nervous, gripping the steering wheel like it was a lifeline, but I figured it was just the usual nerves. When we pull up to this old house, I'm staring at it, trying to picture who lives there. I'm wondering if these people are going to be like some fairy tale grandparents, super loving and warm, or if they're going to hate me for existing. You know, typical 10-year-old thoughts. Then my mom leans over and says, "I need you to do something for me." She lowers her voice like she's about to tell me a secret, and I'm all ears because, up to this point, she's been so weirdly quiet about the whole thing. She tells me that I'm going to be the one to introduce myself. I was supposed to say something like, "Hi, I'm your granddaughter," and do the whole sad puppy dog eyes routine. Now at this point, I'm a kid who just wants to make my mom happy, so I agree, even though I don't really understand what's happening. All I know is that my mom seems anxious, and I'd been trained by then to do whatever it took to keep things smooth between us. So we walk up to the door, and she's all smiles. But it's this forced smile that's kind of creepy when I think back on it. My grandparents answer the door, and I just blurt out, "Hi, I'm your granddaughter," like it's some big reveal. They stand there, stunned. It's awkward, really awkward. My mom is standing behind me, nudging me forward like I'm supposed to put on some kind of show. I can feel their eyes on me, scanning, trying to understand what they're even looking at. At this point, I realize they had no idea I existed. None. My grandma covers her mouth, and my grandpa just keeps staring. It's like they're trying to solve a puzzle without all the pieces. I start feeling weird, like maybe I'm intruding or something. But before I can react, my mom jumps in and tries to smooth it over with some fake laughs and a story about how she's been meaning to introduce us, but just hadn't gotten around to it. She goes on, and I'm just standing there, feeling like an outsider in my own family. She keeps telling them how great it's been. Just her and me, and I'm listening, trying to figure out where this version of our life even came from. She talks like we've been living some fairy tale life, just me and her against the world. Meanwhile, I'm realizing more and more that I don't know anything about her past or why we've been on our own this whole time. Finally, after what feels like an eternity of awkward conversation, she drops the real reason we're there. She wants us to stay with them for a while. But instead of asking them herself, she nudges me and whispers, "Go on, ask them." So there I am, 10 years old, looking up at these strangers who just found out I exist, and I'm supposed to ask if we can live with them. I feel like I'm betraying them somehow, like I'm some pawn in this weird game my mom is playing, but I do it. I look at them with the biggest, saddest eyes I can manage and ask if we can stay with them for just a little while. I even say it the way my mom coached me, making it sound like it's just this small favor, nothing major. My grandma's eyes tear up, and my grandpa looks at me with this softness I'd never really seen before. I could tell they didn't know what to say. They just stood there processing it all, and finally they agree. They say we can stay. And my mom? She's all smiles, acting like this was her plan all along, like she'd finally decided to reconnect with family or something. But I knew better. I could see it in her eyes that this wasn't about family. It was about her needing a place to crash. Living there was weird, to say the least. My mom made me keep up this charade, like I was some well-behaved kid from a stable family. But I felt like an outsider. I remember seeing old photos of my mom with her siblings and cousins on my grandparents' walls, and I'd stare at them, wondering why I was never in any of them, why I didn't know these people sooner. My grandparents tried to make me feel welcome, but I could tell they were thrown off by the whole situation. They'd ask me questions about school, about where we'd been living, and every time I'd start to answer, my mom would step in and change the subject. She didn't want them knowing much about our life. It was like she had this whole image she wanted to keep up, and I was just part of the performance. After a while, I started to see what my mom was really doing. She was using me to make this whole thing smoother for her. Every time I started feeling comfortable, she'd pull me back into her little web, reminding me that I needed to play nice and keep quiet about certain things. I felt like I was carrying her secrets on my shoulders, secrets I didn't even fully understand. Looking back, I don't know why I went along with it. Maybe I just wanted to keep the peace. Maybe I thought it'd be worth it if it meant I'd finally have family in my life. But I knew even then that this wasn't normal. This wasn't how family was supposed to be. So after we settled in with my grandparents, I thought things might get better, like maybe I'd get to have a normal family life. I figured my mom would change now that we were around people who actually cared about us. But that didn't happen. If anything, things got worse. My mom was always on edge around my grandparents, like she was trying too hard to fit in. She would act overly sweet and helpful, which was not her usual style. I didn't think much of it at first, but then I started to realize that she was only putting on this show for my grandparents. Around them, she was the loving mom who was finally reconnecting with her family. But when we were alone, she'd snap back to her usual self, impatient, annoyed, and constantly busy with her own life. I started noticing it more when she started dating again. She'd met this guy, Mike, through some mutual friend, and he was all right, I guess. Nothing special, but my mom was all in, like she'd found her next big project. And that's the thing with my mom. Every guy she dated was like her new project. She'd throw herself into these relationships, giving them all her attention, like she was on some mission to make them work. For a while, it was just a casual thing, but then she started bringing Mike around to my grandparents' house. She'd act all lovey-dovey with him in front of everyone, laughing too loud and making a big deal out of every little thing he did. I could see my grandparents were a bit thrown off. I mean, we'd just shown up out of nowhere, and now she's dragging this guy into the mix. But they didn't say anything because they were trying to make this family thing work too. One time, I tried to talk to her about it. I didn't have much experience with relationships. I mean, I was only like 11 or 12. But I knew enough to see she was putting him first, way above me. So I told her straight up, I don't think it's fair you're spending all this time with Mike. She looked at me like I'd just insulted her or something. Then she gave me this whole speech about how I needed to get on board and how she'd sacrificed so much to be my mom. I'd heard it all before. That whole "I gave up everything for you" line. I used to feel bad when she'd say it, like I was this burden she was stuck with. But that day, something clicked, and I just stopped feeling sorry. I didn't even respond. I just let her keep talking because I knew she wasn't going to listen to me anyway. She never did. From then on, I just started keeping my mouth shut. I knew better than to bring it up again, and I figured if she was happy pretending everything was perfect, fine. I'd let her pretend. But I couldn't shake this feeling that I was invisible. My mom would be out with Mike all the time, sometimes leaving me at my grandparents' place for days on end without even checking in. I was supposed to be her kid, but she was treating me like an afterthought, and every time she walked through the door, it was like I didn't even exist. What made it worse was how she'd use me whenever she needed to win Mike over. If he ever came around to visit, she'd parade me around, making me perform as this perfect daughter. She'd be like, "Oh, tell Mike about your school project," or "show him your piano piece." And it felt so fake. I was just this tool she used to impress him, like, "Look what a great mom I am." But as soon as he'd leave, I'd go back to being nobody. Then, to top it all off, there was this one time she asked if I could help out by sharing a room with Mike's two kids if they ever came over. His kids were younger, maybe 5 or 6, and needed a lot of attention. My mom was just going on and on about how it would be good for me to have siblings and a bonding experience. But all I could think was, are you serious? She wanted me to squeeze into my own tiny space with two kids I barely knew, just to make her boyfriend feel more at home. I tried to push back, saying it wasn't fair, and she got mad. Really mad. She said I was being selfish, that I needed to grow up and understand that she needed a life too. She kept hammering in that same line about how much she'd sacrificed and how this was her chance at happiness. I'd never seen her so intense about anything. After that, I just gave up. I knew there was no point in arguing. She wasn't going to listen. I was tired of feeling like a burden, tired of trying to get her to see me as more than just some problem to deal with. So I did what she wanted. I shared a room with these random kids whenever they came over, and I pretended to be happy about it. I played the part, did the big sister thing because I figured it'd be easier than fighting her on it. But inside, I was just done. I'd lost any hope that she'd ever change. I kept my head down, went to school, did my homework, and tried to stay out of the way. I spent as much time as I could at my grandparents' house because honestly, it felt like the only place where I mattered. They'd ask me about my day, actually listen to my answers, and I started to feel normal. But every time I had to go back home to my mom, it was like walking back into this invisible role. I was there, but I wasn't. And it wasn't like my grandparents didn't notice. They saw how my mom acted. They'd ask me gentle questions like, "Are you happy here?" Or "Do you like Mike?" But I couldn't bring myself to tell them everything. I didn't want to drag them into it, and I was too used to keeping quiet. I just shrugged and gave short answers, hoping they wouldn't dig too deep. The worst part was that I could tell my grandparents felt guilty. They'd go out of their way to make sure I felt included, planning little trips or taking me out for ice cream, trying to make up for what my mom wasn't giving me. I appreciated it, but it only made me feel worse because I knew they shouldn't have to step in like that. They'd already raised their own kids. They shouldn't have to be raising me too. Looking back, I can't believe I let things go on like that. But when you're a kid, you just go along with whatever's in front of you, especially when it's all you've ever known. I didn't know how to stand up for myself, and honestly, I don't think I even knew I was allowed to. So I just kept my head down and did what was expected. It was right around this time that my mom's life took another big turn, as she called it. She'd been dating this new guy she met online. Let's call him Steve. They started chatting during that lockdown when everyone was stuck at home, and I guess things escalated pretty quickly between them. Before I knew it, she was calling him her soulmate and going on and on about how amazing he was. I didn't pay much attention at first, honestly. I'd seen this happen so many times before that it didn't even faze me anymore. But this time it was different. Within a year of dating online, she decided to pack us up and move into his place. I didn't get a say in it, of course. One day she just sat me down and said, "We're moving in with Steve." She said it like she just announced we were going on a weekend trip or something. There was no, "What do you think?" or "Are you okay with this?" Just a done deal. In 2 weeks, we packed up and moved into Steve's house, which was in another town, far enough that I'd have to change schools and start over. When we got there, it wasn't just Steve. Nope, Steve came with his own package. 3 kids, all under 10. So now suddenly, I'm living in this house with a bunch of strangers. Steve, his kids, and my mom, who was acting like she'd just won the lottery. She kept saying, "Isn't this great? We're finally a real family." But I didn't feel like part of it. I felt like an intruder in their happy little setup. The house itself was small, and with that many people crammed in, it felt even smaller. The kids were loud, constantly running around, yelling, and basically doing whatever they wanted. Steve wasn't much of a disciplinarian. He'd just laugh and tell them to calm down if they got too rowdy, but that was about it. My mom, on the other hand, was all about impressing him. She'd act like Supermom, helping his kids with their homework, playing with them, making them snacks. All the things she'd never done for me. I tried to stay out of the way as much as possible. I'd sit in my room, which I shared with Steve's youngest daughter, and just read or listen to music, anything to block out the noise. But no matter how much I tried to keep to myself, my mom always found a way to drag me back into the chaos. She'd make me play with Steve's kids, saying it was good bonding time, or she'd call me into the living room to help with chores while everyone else just relaxed. I was like a built-in babysitter, maid, an extra pair of hands for anything she needed. It didn't take long for me to realize that I was the outsider here. My mom had become more involved with Steve's kids than she'd ever been with me. They were younger, sure, and I guess in her mind, that meant they needed more attention, but it hurt. I was still her kid, wasn't I? But the way she acted around them, it was like she was trying to make up for something. She'd laugh and joke with them, do little things to make them happy, like tuck them into bed or help them with projects for school. I don't remember her ever doing that stuff for me. Then came the big surprise. A few weeks after we'd moved in, my mom gathered everyone in the living room, all excited, and announced that she and Steve were getting married. She was practically glowing, looking around at us like she'd just delivered the best news of our lives. Steve's kids were jumping up and down, cheering. Meanwhile, I just sat there, stunned. I hadn't even gotten used to living with these people, and now she was marrying him. This was going to be my life, like, forever? She looked over at me, probably noticing my lack of excitement, and gave me that "don't ruin this" look. I forced a smile, did the whole "wow, congratulations" thing, but inside I was just numb. All I could think about was how this felt more like her dream than mine. She'd always wanted that perfect family setup, and I guess she finally found it. But I didn't fit in here. I was just there, blending into the background while she was front and center, playing the role she'd always wanted. The wedding itself was weird. It was super low-key, just a quick ceremony in their backyard with a few of Steve's friends and some family. My mom didn't even invite my grandparents, which stung because they were the only family I felt connected to. I asked her why, and she shrugged it off, saying something about wanting to keep it intimate. I knew it was because she didn't want any reminders of her past life. She wanted this clean slate, her shiny new family, without anything that might mess up the picture she was trying to paint. After the wedding, things just got worse. With Steve's kids officially becoming her real family, my mom started treating me more like the live-in help than her daughter. She'd assign me chores, extra tasks around the house, saying it was only fair since we were all one big family now. But the only family part I saw was me doing more than my share of the work. Steve's kids? They got away with everything. If they made a mess, I'd be the one told to clean it up. If they didn't finish their homework, I'd get dragged in to help them. I was the unofficial fixer of everything they didn't feel like handling. I tried talking to my mom about it once. I sat her down and told her how I felt left out, like I didn't belong here. She listened for about 5 seconds before launching into a guilt trip about how I should be grateful for having a family, and how hard it was for her to make everything work. She made me feel like I was being selfish for even bringing it up. So, I let it go. What else was I supposed to do? Steve wasn't much better. He'd act polite enough around me, but I could tell he didn't really see me as part of the family either. To him, I was just my mom's baggage, someone who came along with the package deal. If I ever needed something, like help with schoolwork or even just a ride somewhere, he'd act annoyed, like I was asking for the world. But his kids? They got whatever they wanted, no questions asked. It was clear who the real family was in his eyes, and it definitely didn't include me. So, I adapted. I stopped asking for anything, stopped trying to be part of the family. I went through the motions, did my chores, kept my head down. I figured if I just stayed out of everyone's way, maybe things would be easier. My grandparents were the only ones who noticed something was off. They'd call and ask how things were going, and I'd always say, "It's fine." But I think they knew, deep down, that I was lying. Living there was like being a ghost in my own life. I was there, but I wasn't really seen. It was like the whole world was moving around me, with everyone else laughing, making memories, and living their lives, while I was just existing. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't a family. It was just a setup, a picture-perfect scene that looked great on the outside but felt hollow inside. I didn't know what to do about it, so I did nothing. I just kept going, day by day, hoping that maybe, somehow, things would change. But deep down, I was starting to accept that I'd always be second place, always the one on the sidelines, watching everyone else live the life that I was never really a part of. Living with my mom and her new family was like being in a constant cycle of frustration and feeling invisible. I thought it would get better over time, or that I'd eventually get used to it, But the longer I stayed, the more I realized that nothing was going to change. It wasn't just a phase or a transition period. This was my life now, and I was starting to feel trapped in it. That's when I began spending more time with my grandparents. At first, it was just weekends here and there, just to get a break from the chaos at home. But as time went on, it became my escape. My grandparents welcomed me with open arms every single time. They didn't ask me to be anything other than myself, and I didn't have to keep up some happy family act around them. They were just there for me. My grandma would make me breakfast, sit with me, and actually ask about my life, and not in that fake way that my mom did, where she was only half listening. My grandparents genuinely cared. My grandpa would ask about school, and I could tell he remembered details I'd told him from weeks before, which was something new for me. With my mom, I'd be lucky if she even remembered what grade I was in. I started to feel comfortable with my grandparents in a way I never did at home. I could breathe there. I didn't have to be the helper or the big sister or anything. I could just be me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I mattered. It felt like I actually belonged somewhere, and that feeling became addictive. I began dreading going back to my mom's house after each weekend. The contrast between the two places was just too much. One Sunday night, as my grandma was dropping me off at my mom's, she noticed I was quiet. She asked me if everything was all right, and I don't know what came over me. But I just started crying. I think I'd been holding it in for so long that the second someone genuinely asked, it all just poured out. I told her everything, how I felt like I was just a second thought, how my mom barely seemed to notice me unless she needed something, and how I felt more at home with them than I did in my actual house. My grandma listened without interrupting, which was new for me. When I finished, she just hugged me and told me that I was always welcome with them. She said that if I ever wanted to stay longer, I just had to let her know. She didn't push it, didn't make a big deal out of it. She just let me know I had options. That night, as I lay in bed back at my mom's, I couldn't stop thinking about what my grandma had said. I felt this weird mix of relief and guilt. The idea of living with my grandparents full-time sounded amazing, but at the same time, I felt bad for even considering it. Like, would I be abandoning my mom? Was it selfish? But then I thought about how she'd barely notice I was gone, and the guilt started to fade. Over the next few weeks, I kept going back and forth in my mind, trying to decide what to do. Every time I spent the weekend at my grandparents' house, it felt like the decision was already made. I was happier there. I didn't have to tiptoe around anyone's feelings or pretend to be part of a family I didn't feel connected to. And every time I went back to my mom's, the difference was glaring. Finally, one Friday afternoon, after a rough week at school, and a particularly awkward dinner with my mom, Steve, and his kids, I decided I was done. I was done feeling like a stranger in my own home, done playing a part in this fake family picture. I wanted out. I didn't even pack much. I just threw a few things into my backpack, took a deep breath, and went to my mom. I told her straight up, I want to live with Grandma and Grandpa. She looked at me, stunned. At first, she thought I was joking, but when she realized I was serious, she went from surprised to annoyed. She started saying all the things I expected, about how it was just a rough patch, how every family has issues, and how I needed to give it a real chance. I told her I'd given it more than a chance. I told her how I felt like I didn't belong, how she was more invested in Steve's kids than she'd ever been in me. She tried to deny it, saying that I was being dramatic, that I was imagining things, but I could see in her eyes that she knew I was right. Then came the guilt trip. She started talking about how hard she'd worked to give us a family, how much she'd sacrificed, and how I was making it harder for her by wanting to leave. She said I was being unfair, that I was running away instead of helping her build this new life. For a split second, I started to feel guilty again. But then I remembered all the times I'd been pushed aside, all the times I'd felt invisible, and I held firm. I'm sorry, I told her, but I need to be somewhere where I feel wanted. She tried one last time, saying that living with my grandparents wasn't the solution, that it wouldn't be the same as being with my real family. But I'd made up my mind. I told her I'd already talked to Grandma and Grandpa, and they were okay with it. She looked shocked, like she couldn't believe I'd gone that far without telling her. But what was I supposed to do? Wait around for her to care? Eventually, she just sighed and said, Fine, if that's what you want. She made it sound like I was the one breaking up the family, like I was the problem. But by then, I'd stopped caring about what she thought. I just wanted to be somewhere that felt like home. So that was it. I grabbed my bag, called my grandparents, and within the hour, my grandma was there to pick me up. As I walked out of my mom's house, I felt this strange mix of sadness and relief. Part of me wished things could have been different, that my mom could have made me feel like I belonged. But the bigger part of me was just ready to leave. When I got to my grandparents' house, they didn't make a big fuss. They just hugged me, helped me unpack, and told me I could stay as long as I wanted. For the first time in a long time, I felt safe, like I could finally breathe without constantly worrying about whether I was doing enough to earn someone's attention. That first night, lying in bed at my grandparents' house, I felt this weight lift off my shoulders. I wasn't just a part of someone else's life anymore, squeezed into a role that didn't fit me. I was starting to carve out my own place, where I didn't have to compete for anyone's attention or prove my worth. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, I was okay with that. I felt free. Living with my grandparents felt like I'd finally found what I'd been looking for all along, a real sense of home. There wasn't any forced happy family nonsense or playing pretend for anyone else. They were just there. They made me feel safe, and I knew I was genuinely welcome. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to walk on eggshells or earn my place in the house. At first, I thought my mom would come around, maybe even reach out to talk about everything that happened. Part of me expected she'd call, apologize, or at least ask how I was doing. But days went by, then weeks, and nothing. Not a single call, not a text, nothing. It was like I had vanished from her life as easily as I'd walked out the door. It hurt, even if I was trying to act like I didn't care. I couldn't help but feel like this confirmed what I'd known deep down all along. I was never her priority. My grandparents never brought her up, but I could tell they were waiting to see if she'd come around too. They'd glance at the phone when it rang, or my grandma would check her texts more often than usual. I guess they were hoping she'd come to her senses, just like I was. But she didn't. And over time, I just accepted it. I realized that I didn't need her approval to feel happy. Not anymore. Things at my grandparents' house just kept getting better. I was doing well in school, made some new friends, and got involved in things I actually enjoyed. My grandparents encouraged me to be myself in ways my mom never did. They didn't push me to act like the perfect daughter or big sister. They just wanted me to be happy. But of course, life isn't perfect. About 6 months after I moved in, I heard some news that made me realize just how little my mom had actually thought about me after I left. Apparently, she and Steve decided to adopt his kids, all three of them. They wanted to make the family official, and she was even throwing a big party to celebrate. I found out because one of my mom's old friends, who still kept in touch with my grandma, casually mentioned it. Hearing that stung, even if I tried to pretend it didn't. I mean, she couldn't be bothered to reach out to me, but she had all this energy to throw a party and celebrate her new official family. It was like I was just a ghost to her, someone who'd walked out and left no impact. I kept thinking, what did I do wrong? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that it wasn't about me. This was her, always looking for something shiny and new, always ready to put other people ahead of me. My grandparents saw how much it hurt, even if I didn't say anything. My grandma pulled me aside one night, and she just sat with me in silence for a while. Finally, she said, "You didn't do anything wrong. Some people just don't know how to be there for the people who need them most." She didn't say it directly, but I knew she was talking about my mom. I knew she was right too, even if it still felt like a knife in the chest. As more time passed, I found myself moving on, little by little. My grandparents made sure I was surrounded by people who genuinely cared, and I focused on building a life for myself that didn't involve her. It was tough, especially around holidays or big events when you'd expect a parent to be there, but I'd already gotten used to not having her around for those things. In a weird way, it wasn't much different than how things were when I was actually living with her. And then, out of nowhere, karma hit her hard. One day, my grandma got a call from one of her friends. Apparently, things had gone south between my mom and Steve. Steve had lost his job, and without his income, they were struggling to make ends meet. It turned out he wasn't too great with money, and they'd been living beyond their means for a while. When he couldn't keep up with...
What are you doing, Mitchell? Do you think she'll ever find out? Isn't this exciting? That voice. My heart faltered at the sound of it. I had come home early, feeling uneasy for reasons I couldn't explain. Now, standing in the hallway, I could hear laughter and clinking glasses coming from the living room. Cautiously stepping forward, I peeked through the slightly ajar door. My husband Mitchell, my best friend Natalie, and my mother Donna were all sitting there, a half-empty bottle of wine on the table, surrounded by an aura of infectious joy. Mitchell's arm was around Natalie, and my mother was sitting so close to him, their knees almost touching. What's so funny? I stepped into the room, my voice heavier than I intended. The laughter died. They looked at me, stunned, eyes wide with guilt. Donna was the first to speak, masking her surprise with a too bright smile. "Casey, you're home early. We were just Catching up. Obviously, I said, my eyes narrowing. What's the occasion? Natalie, twirling the wineglass, tried to play it off. Just a casual get-together. We've been missing you. I scrutinized their expressions, the forced ease and underlying tension. My stomach churned. Missing me? Since when? Mitchell rose from the couch, walking towards me with an easy smile that no longer reassured me. Hey, babe, you okay? You look pale. Ignoring his concern, I focused on their little setup. So, what's this intimate gathering about? Something you wanted to share? Donna set her glass down, her hand trembling slightly. You're reading too much into it, darling. Relax. I was anything but relaxed. I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe. Really? Because from here it looks like a private party I wasn't invited to. A flicker of something, guilt, perhaps, flashed in Mitchell's eyes, but he quickly smothered it with a laugh. Casey, come on, it's not like that. We just needed to unwind a bit. Natalie nodded, but her agreement felt hollow, like an echo in a vast, empty space. Yeah, we just needed a break, you know? Everything's been stressful for everyone. I looked at my husband, my best friend, and my mother, feeling the walls closing in, the air heavy with deceit. Of course, I said, though I didn't believe a word. I stood there, feeling shattered but determined not to expose my hurt. Well, don't let me interrupt your good time. I turned and walked away, my steps determined, my fists clenched tight. In the quiet of the hallway, their laughter resumed. But it sounded different now, forced, like a brittle shell hiding the rot beneath. I'd witnessed enough to know something was terribly wrong. Beneath my calm exterior, the reality of their betrayal burned, each laugh and every whisper like a blade slicing through my skin. In that moment, I knew. This was just the beginning. I had to uncover the full extent of their deception. The laughter sounded different now. It haunted me as I climbed the stairs, each step feeling like I was dragging a boulder. I pushed open the door to my bedroom and collapsed onto the bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together the fragments of my unraveling life. A flood of memories hit me. Growing up, it was just Mom and me. We were so close. Even now, her betrayal stung like a fresh wound. I remembered how she would hold my hand, telling me everything would be okay when things were tough. All lies now. Pushing the painful thoughts aside, I focused on my career. It had always been my escape, the one place where I felt in control. I'd worked hard for years, climbing the corporate ladder. All the late nights, the missed family dinners. Mitchell had supported me through it all, or so I thought. Now it seemed like it had given him time to form his twisted trinity. A faint knock on the door pulled me back to reality. Casey, can we talk? Mitchell's voice was on the other side. I clenched my teeth, forcing myself to stay calm. I opened the door. What do you want? He looked uncomfortable, scratching the back of his neck. I noticed you weren't yourself downstairs. Are you okay? I don't know, Mitchell. You tell me. My voice was cold, distant. He stepped closer, reaching out, but I stepped back. Casey, please, you're overreacting. Nothing's going on. Overreacting? The word bounced around in my head. Is that how you see it? Just friends hanging out, right? He sighed, frustration creeping into his tone. Yes, that's all it is. You're making this bigger than it needs to be. I laughed, a bitter sound. Bigger than it needs to be? My husband, my best friend, and my mother hiding things from me. Yeah, I must be crazy. Before he could respond, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Natalie. Hey, can we talk? I think there's been a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. They really thought they could brush this under the rug. Mitchell was watching, sensing the shift in my mood. Natalie wants to talk. I guess it's time for a group therapy session, huh? His face paled. Casey, don't do this. Ignoring him, I walked past, heading back to the living room. Donna and Natalie looked up as I entered, sensing the storm approaching. Natalie, you wanted to talk. Let's clear this up right now. Natalie stood, hesitant. Casey, we're just friends. You came in at the wrong time. Donna nodded, her eyes pleading. Darling, please, it's not what you think. I took a deep breath, gathering every ounce of strength. Enough. I'm not blind. I hear things. I see things. How long will you keep lying to my face? The silence that followed was heavy, filled with unspoken truths. The tight thread holding my life together was unraveling fast. One thing was clear. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was the beginning of a battle, and I wasn't backing down. The air in the living room was stifling. I felt everyone's eyes on me, searching for a crack in my resolve, but I stood firm. Natalie, I said, my voice cold and steady, if it's all innocent, why don't you explain the odd messages, the secret meetings? Natalie shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting toward Mitchell and Donna. Casey, it's not a big deal. We've just been close lately, that's all. Close? I spat the word back at her. How close exactly? Her silence was damning. Mitchell stepped in, his tone a mix of annoyance and desperation. You're being paranoid. There's nothing going on. We're friends, that's it. I shook my head, anger bubbling over. Friends don't hide things. Friends don't act like this behind someone's back. Donna tried to soften the blow, reaching out to me. Honey, you're working so hard. We just wanted to make sure you had support, people to lean on. My mother's attempt at justification pushed me over the edge. Support? By excluding and lying to me? That's how you support me? Thus, I could see Mitchell's patience wearing thin. We didn't want to bother you with every little thing, Casey. You're always busy. Busy. Right, I said, nodding, letting the word hang in the air. So busy that I missed the signs, the little things that didn't add up. Mitchell's frustration spilled out. This isn't what you think it is. Why can't you just accept that we were trying to make things easier for you? Easier? I laughed bitterly. By making me feel like an outsider in my own life? Natalie, her voice shaky, tried to interject. Casey, please, we never meant to hurt you. Never meant to hurt me. Then why does it feel like you've stabbed me in the back? I could barely control the tremor in my voice. I gave my life to this family. I trusted you all. Donna's eyes filled with tears, but I had no sympathy left. All right, you've made your point, she said quietly, but let's not blow this out of proportion. Out of proportion? I let out a breath of pure disbelief. You've been hiding something huge from me, and you want to downplay it? Hannah's small voice drifted from the hallway. Mommy, what's going on? I turned to see my daughter, her innocent eyes wide with worry. My heart ached, but I forced a smile. Nothing, sweetie. Just grown-up talk. As Hannah shuffled back to her room, I looked at the three of them, a husband, a best friend, and a mother who had conspired to keep me in the dark. I'm done with this conversation, I declared, my voice firm. You think I'm overreacting? Fine, but I'm not done digging. With that, I left the room, the bitter taste of betrayal thick in my mouth. Whatever was going on, I was going to find out, and there would be a reckoning. The tension in the house thickened each day. I couldn't look at Mitchell, Natalie, or Donna without feeling a surge of anger. Hannah noticed my distraction but was too young to understand. Meanwhile, the odd behaviors were piling up, one by one, painting an increasingly sinister picture. It started with the phone calls. Whenever I walked into the room, Donna would end her conversation abruptly. Just catching up with an old friend, she'd say, smiling too brightly. Then there were the glances between Mitchell and Natalie. They exchanged looks that felt like silent agreements, words left unspoken, connected by something I wasn't part of. Late-night meetings, whispers in the kitchen, flipping their phones upside down, every small action screamed secrecy. One evening, I caught a glimpse of a flirtatious text on Mitchell's phone before he quickly locked the screen. My stomach turned, but I stayed calm. Who's that? I asked, keeping my voice light. Just a work thing, he replied, too quickly. My suspicion solidified. I needed more than snippets and gut feelings. I needed undeniable proof. I began paying closer attention. Mitchell's car parked at odd places, Donna's slips about where she'd been, and Natalie's vague explanations about her whereabouts, all clues leading to a single horrific conclusion. They were seeing each other behind my back. As I mentally connected the dots, I confronted them. I gathered Mitchell, Natalie, and Donna in the living room, the same place where my world had started unraveling. We need to talk. Seriously, I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. They exchanged nervous glances. Donna tried to play it cool. What's this about, darling? No more lies, I demanded. I know something's been going on. I want the truth. Mitchell looked to the floor, unable to meet my gaze. Natalie's face flushed red. Donna took a deep breath, finally breaking the silence. All right, Casey, you want the truth? Here it is. A coldness swept over me as she continued. We've been involved, all of us, in a relationship together. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. A relationship? You mean like an affair? All of you? Donna nodded. We didn't mean for it to happen this way, but yes, we've been involved. Polyamorous. Mitchell finally looked up. guilt and relief mingling in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Casey. We didn't know how to tell you. We didn't want to hurt you." Natalie added quickly, "We didn't choose this to hurt you, Casey. It just happened." I stared at them, the reality of their betrayal sinking in. "Hurt me? You think saying that in such a calm tone makes it any less painful?" The facade of my normal life shattered. I felt anger, betrayal, and shock battling within me, but beneath it all, a fierce determination rose. I looked each of them in the eye, a final resolve hardening in my voice. "This is not over. You will regret every bit of this." Their expressions twisted in a mix of fear and uncertainty. They should be scared. I turned and left, my mind racing with plans. My revenge was just beginning. Silence engulfed the room after I walked out. The raw mix of emotions inside me was hard to contain, but I knew I had to stay focused. After a while, I went to Hannah's room and quietly sat by her bed, watching her sleep, her breath even and calm, a soothing contrast to the storm I faced. The next morning, I called my sister Erin. "Can I come over? It's urgent," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Of course, Casey. What's going on?" she asked, concern coloring her tone. "It's complicated. I'll explain when I get there." I hung up, packed a small bag, and gently woke Hannah. "We're going on a little trip to Aunt Erin's, okay?" Hannah's eyes lit up. "Yay! Can we have pancakes for breakfast there?" I forced a smile. "Absolutely." Leaving Mitchell, Donna, and Natalie behind felt like shedding a skin. I drove with a clear purpose, needing the support Erin always provided. When I arrived at Erin's place, she greeted me with a warm hug, instantly knowing something was really wrong. "What happened?" she asked gently as we settled on her couch. "They've been involved. Mitchell, Natalie, and Mom. Behind my back," I managed to say, feeling the sting as fresh as when I discovered the truth. Erin's eyes widened in shock. "What? How could they? I can't believe this." Anger flashed across her face. "You don't deserve this, Casey. I need your help." "I have to protect Hannah and figure out my next steps," I said, my voice steadying with resolve. Erin nodded immediately. "You know I'm with you. Whatever you need." Our first move was to meet with a lawyer. I planned to pursue legal separation from Mitchell and ensure Hannah's custody arrangements protected her from the toxicity. Erin stayed with Hannah to keep things normal for her while I focused on dismantling the life that had become a lie. Later, when I went to pick up Hannah, I faced Mitchell. His eyes were filled with a mix of regret and helplessness. "Casey, can we talk, please?" I looked at him, my voice icy. "There's nothing left to talk about, Mitchell. I've contacted a lawyer. This is over." He looked down, defeated. "I never wanted to hurt you." "Well, you did, and now there are consequences," I replied, turning away to leave. Back at Erin's, my father Robert stopped by. Erin must have told him something, judging by the stern look on his face. "Casey, what's going on?" he asked. The kitchen felt smaller with their expressions bearing down on me. "Mitchell, Natalie, and Mom, they've been in some twisted relationship behind my back." "Donna, too?" Robert asked, his voice a mix of shock and disappointment. I knew she could be selfish, but she did it. "And now I'm going to make sure they realize just how big a mistake it was," I said firmly. Robert reached out, placing a supportive hand on my shoulder. "You will get through this, Casey. We will help you." Looking at Robert and Erin's determined faces, I felt a surge of strength. I wasn't alone in this. With every step, I grew more resolved to cut these toxic ties and protect Hannah from the fallout. Mitchell, Natalie, and Donna thought I was just hurt. They had no idea what was coming their way. Erin's house became our sanctuary. Hannah adjusted to the change with the resilience only a child could muster, soothed by the presence of her doting aunt and stern but loving grandfather. Meanwhile, I threw myself into the legal proceedings. My lawyer, Denise, was a tough woman who didn't mince words. "We need to file for custody and get a restraining order if necessary," Denise said during our first meeting. "Protecting Hannah should be our #1 priority." I nodded. "I can't let her be around them. Not after what they've done." "Yes, every detail matters. Keep it professional, but don't hold back anything relevant." Mitchell's response to the legal notice didn't take long. He was furious, calling and texting relentlessly. When we finally met in mediation, his eyes bore holes into mine. "This is ridiculous, Casey. We can work this out without dragging Hannah into it," he argued. "No, Mitchell, you lost that chance the moment you betrayed me," I shot back. His betrayal felt like an abyss between us, impossible to bridge. Our argument escalated until Denise intervened. Let's keep it civil. We're here for Hannah's best interests. Mitchell fumed but didn't argue further. His lawyer tugged at his sleeve, signaling it was time to dial it down. But I knew the simmering rage and desperation hiding behind his calm facade. The scandal spread quickly through our community. Neighbors whispered behind their hands. Social media buzzed with speculation. One day, dropping Hannah off at school, I overheard a couple of parents. "Did you hear about Casey's husband? Cheated on her with her best friend and her mother. Can you imagine?" I stiffened but walked on, head held high. This wasn't my shame to bear. But the public fallout hit its peak when Sam, Natalie's husband, stormed into the lawyer's office one day. His face was a mask of fury. "Casey, is it true? Natalie and Mitchell?" he demanded. "Yes," I said simply, meeting his gaze. "It's all true." Sam's face twisted with rage and hurt. "I knew something was off. I'm filing for divorce. She won't see a penny from me." His anger was a stark reflection of mine, and I felt a grim satisfaction knowing Natalie would face consequences beyond what I could enact. As the weeks went by, our strategy paid off. The court granted me full custody of Hannah, and Mitchell was ordered to pay alimony and child support. Publicly, the scandal wreaked havoc on his reputation. Donna found herself the target of disdain from her social circles. I never thought she'd go that low. I heard someone say at the grocery store. It was a small satisfaction, but satisfying nonetheless. Natalie, on the other hand, was dealing with Sam's impending divorce suit, a messy, ugly affair. Her once shimmering life was disintegrating. Through it all, Aaron and Robert stayed by my side, helping me rebuild. Their steadfast support was my lifeline. As the dust began to settle, Mitchell approached me one last time. His face was drawn, his eyes hollow. "Casey, is there any way we can start over?" I looked at him, the man who had once been my world, now alien to me. "No, Mitchell, we're done. You need to live with the choices you made. Hannah and I are moving on." Turning away, I felt a surge of relief. I had faced betrayal and found my strength. The road ahead wasn't clear, but at least it was mine to walk, free from deceit and betrayal. Life had settled into a new rhythm at Aaron's house. Hannah was adjusting well, and I finally felt a sense of control returning. But I wasn't done. The time had come for my revenge. Late one evening, after putting Hannah to bed, I sat down with Aaron. "It's time. I need to expose them," I said, my voice resolute. Aaron leaned in, her eyes full of determination. "What's your plan?" I pulled out my laptop and showed her the secret recordings I'd managed to collect over the past few weeks. Mitchell's confessions, Natalie's guilt-ridden ramblings, and Donna's shocking admissions. "These need to go public. People need to see who they really are," I explained. Aaron nodded. "Let's do it. They deserve everything coming their way." Together, we uploaded the videos to a hidden social media account and shared the links anonymously with several community groups and local news outlets. It didn't take long for the videos to go viral. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Comments poured in, expressing disdain and disbelief. The once respected Mitchell, Natalie, and Donna were now subjects of vicious gossip and public shaming. I received a text from Mitchell late that night. "Casey, you need to stop this. It's ruining us." I ignored it. There was no room for mercy. A few days later, I ran into Donna at the grocery store. She looked haggard, a shell of the woman she once was. "Casey, I can't go anywhere without people staring at me. How could you do this?" I met her eyes without flinching. "You did this to yourself, Mom. Actions have consequences." Natalie's life was unraveling, too. Sam's divorce suit was the talk of the town. I heard through mutual friends that she'd been forced to leave her job. One evening, she called me, her voice trembling. "Casey, please, I'm begging you. Stop this. I've lost everything." "Good," I replied coldly. "Now you know how it feels." Mitchell, desperate, showed up at Aaron's doorstep. Aaron stood firm, blocking his way. "You're not welcome here, Mitchell. Leave." He pleaded. "Please, Casey. I was wrong. I'll do anything to fix this." I stepped forward, my face a mask of resolve. "Fix it? There's no fixing this. You did this. Now live with it." With Mitchell gone and my revenge complete, I felt a strange sense of closure. Aaron and Robert's unwavering support had given me the strength to reclaim my life. It had been a long, painful journey, but I had survived and emerged stronger. Through the chaos, Hannah remained my beacon. One evening, As we sat together watching her favorite show, she turned to me and said, "Mommy, are we happy now?" I smiled, genuinely this time. "Yes, sweetie, we're happy." In the weeks that followed, Mitchell's life fell apart. He lost his job, became a pariah in the community, and was left to brood in his isolation. Donna and Natalie were similarly ostracized, struggling to rebuild their shattered reputations. As for me, I found peace in the simple joys: morning pancakes with Hannah, quiet evenings with Aaron and Robert, and the calm certainty that I had done the right thing. The web of deceit that once strangled my life was gone. Looking ahead, I saw a future filled with hope and new beginnings. Mitchell, Natalie, and Donna had tried to break me, but all they did was make me stronger. Standing in the warm sunlight, holding Hannah's hand, I knew that we had finally found our way out of the darkness, and there was no going back. Months passed, and a sense of normalcy slowly returned. Aaron's house had become a home for Hannah and me. The chaos created by Mitchell, Natalie, and Donna's betrayal was starting to feel like a distant nightmare. One sunny Saturday morning, Aaron and I were watching Hannah play in the backyard when the doorbell rang. It was Mitchell. He looked like a ghost of his former self, pale, tired, and aged beyond his years. "Can we talk, please?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Aaron stayed inside, ready to intervene if necessary. I stepped out onto the porch, folding my arms. "What do you want, Mitchell?" He struggled for words, desperation clear in his eyes. "I lost everything, Casey. My job, my friends, my life. I know I deserve it, but I need to see Hannah. Please." "She's doing fine without you. Better, in fact," I replied, not ready to soften. "Casey," he pleaded, "I know I can't fix what I did, but she's my daughter, too." "I don't want to miss her growing up," I sighed, feeling a conflict within. "You should have thought of that before you betrayed us." He nodded, a broken man. "I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to both of you if you'll let me." "Go home, Mitchell," I said warily. "I'll think about it." Back inside, Erin looked at me, concern etched on her face. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, exhaling slowly. "Just dealing with the wreckage." My father, Robert, came by often, offering the kind of quiet support that spoke volumes. "You're doing great, Casey. Better than I ever expected." "Thanks, Dad," I said, appreciating his steady presence. His wisdom anchored me, reminding me of the simple truths that kept me grounded. Donna's attempts to mend our severed bond were less frequent but equally poignant. One afternoon she called. "Casey, I miss you. I'm so sorry for everything." "The damage is done, Mom," I answered with a sad finality. "It's going to take more than an apology to fix this." Over time, the sharp edges of betrayal dulled, replaced by a new focus: Hannah's future. We settled into a comfortable routine, life's small joys reminding me what mattered most. I threw myself into my work, finding new goals and achievements to pursue. One evening, as I tucked Hannah into bed, she looked up at me with bright eyes filled with trust. "Will Daddy ever come home?" I brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Maybe someday, sweetie. But remember, you're surrounded by people who love you. That's what matters." In the following months, Mitchell tried to rebuild his shattered life. The floor of rock bottom taught him humility he'd never known. Natalie and Donna, too, faced their own lonely paths, ostracized by friends and community. I received updates through the grapevine but kept my distance. Their struggles were theirs to bear, consequences of their choices. I was busy with something far more important: creating a safe, loving environment for Hannah. One day, walking hand in hand with Hannah through a park, I felt a sense of peace. "Mommy, look at the ducks," she shouted excitedly. I smiled, squeezing her tiny hand. "They're beautiful, aren't they?" For the first time in a long while, the future looked bright. I had faced the nightmare, fought my battles, and emerged stronger. The chains of betrayal had been broken, replaced by new hopes and dreams. Standing there, watching Hannah laugh and play, I knew we were going to be all right. Our story wasn't just about revenge, it was about rediscovering life, finding strength in the ruins, and building a future free from the shadows of deceit.